The Central Bank of Nigeria is urging Nigerians to support the currency redesign project, which is in their overall interest and that of the economy at large. Central Bank is also insisting that it follow the law and due process to carry out the redesigning exercise, which is 12 years due. This is coming as a former Deputy Governor of the CBN, Professor Kingsley Moghalu, commended the Apex Bank on the proposed redesigning of the Naira, saying that the measures will address insecurity in the country. The Apex Bank's clarification came against the backdrop of claims by the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, that our ministry was not carried along on the proposed redesigning of the Naira. Well, let's discuss this with an investment strategist at AfriInvest Assets Management Limited, Mr. Temitope Moshuyi. Thank you so much. It's good to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, let me just start with the regular question that everyone wants to know. What is your direct reaction to this redesigning thing? Is it also due? Is it also long overdue in your thoughts?
So I think, yes, it's long overdue going by global best practice because it's expected that the currency is redesigned every 5 years. However, one has to look at the prevailing macroeconomic condition, and one of which is we've seen series of shocks from 2020 to date, and such currency redesigning would definitely, and it has started having some major impact on the economy. And I'm sure you've seen what is happening to exchange rates, even if things are not, even if the illicit money, as assumed by most people, is not affecting exchange rate, but the expectation is actually taking a toll on the FS market. So even though, yes, it's due, but that shouldn't be the priority because the focus should be on how we can enhance financial inclusion, how to continue to promote cashless policy, and also address other major critical macroeconomy problems like inflation, the worsening fiscal condition, external condition, and a number of other factors, unemployment and frail economic growth. So I think those should be the point of focus right now, rather than just looking at redesigning
but some analysts
currency.
will argue with you and tell you that these are global issues. It's not just Nigeria. We see inflation in the UK. We see inflation in the US. We see inflation in other countries. Unemployment rates, price of gas. We see what is happening. So it's not like just a Nigerian thing.
So there are outliers. We have a number of countries currently that inflation is not even up to 5%. So why can't we be among those countries that have stable prices? For instance, look at the current problem in Russia. Despite sanctions here and there, you can't believe that inflation is currently moving downward in Russia. As a matter of fact, the country will continue to look at going a dovish stance, amidst all the current exogenous factors affecting inflation. Same with China, Japan. Inflation is still less than 3-4%. So it's not just fine. Nigeria economy has been largely susceptible to what is happening globally. But then I think we should have diversified the economy significantly. Even though yes, the economy is diversified, but our revenue base is not so diversified. So we are still very susceptible to what is happening globally. Imports, we are import dependent, particularly for some specific strategically important materials that are needed by manufacturers. So I think, yes, external factors are affecting what is happening in Nigeria, but then we could have done something about it because we saw recent shock in 2020. That should have taught us a lesson that, yes, the economy is highly vulnerable. We saw one in 2016 that shows the extent of Nigeria economic vulnerability. And here we are in 2020, inflation is well above 20%. And with the current, exchange rate shock that we've seen recently shows that the pressure on commodity prices for local, in Nigeria is not the end, it's not even in sight. So I think we need to do something about it rather than, looking at other areas that are not so significant or that areas that don't have significant impact on inflation.
And so for you said it's already having an impact on the foreign exchange side of it. So are you in tune with that fact that some people with cash are trying to change to dollars and keep more of dollars and let the cash go because of this redesigning this redesigning proposal by the CBN? Yes.
I think one cannot really discard the fact that some people would definitely do that. But then, one thing with reaction of macro variable to economic policies, statement and event is, is expectation, regardless of even the actual action by people with illicit money that want to convert to dollar, but the fact that people think it will happen. So you would, for instance, if you know that it's a general consensus that people would do such, if you need dollar in February next year, you want to front load this year because you don't know what will happen. So the expectation that, exchange rate would deteriorate, you would definitely want to front load. And as many people that are doing that, even for legitimate reason, is going to continue to put, pressure on the FS market, and which is exactly what we are seeing in the, in the FS market, beyond just because that cannot be substantiated, by any data to say that, yes, you can't substantiate it. And if you look at even currency outside the bank, that is the bane of this whole argument and narrative, I think there's some miscalculation, or I would say some misinterpretation on those things. Because, for instance, we are talking about currency outside the bank as a ratio of currency circulation, right? The CBN is saying that it's now around 80%. But if you look at, the trend over time for the last 10, 20 years.
Yeah, I think we have the picture. Yes, we have that. Go ahead.
So if you look at the trend for the last 20, 30 years, in fact, recently it has even declined compared to what we saw when inflation was even single digits. So currently, it's about 80%, right? And if you compare this to advanced economies, it's over 90, 100%. So that shouldn't, in fact, is becoming concerning if the CBN is saying that 80% currency, outside of bank as a percentage of currency circulation at 80% is a problem, because currency in circulation is actually bank notes that is expected to be in circulation. Currency in circulation should be in circulation and not elsewhere. That's why it's called currency in circulation. So if currency in circulation is not in circulation, that is in the vault of commercial bank, because currency circulation is a combination of currency with the public and currency in the vault of bank, or currency outside of bank and currency in the vault of bank. So if that is not, if the currency is not outside, if it's not in the circulation, then it means the CBN is actually not achieving the objective of pushing those money into the system. On the other hand, if you even look at the proportion of this money, to money supply, because what we've been discussing all this while is how money supply is affecting inflation. But if you look at currency in circulation, currency circulation is broader than currency outside the bank, because currency outside the bank, currency circulation is currency outside the bank, that is currency with public plus money in the vault of bank. When you put the two together, those notes are currency circulation from the CBN that the CBN has injected. So if you look at this money, it's just about 30 trillion compared to over 45 trillion money supply. So if our attention is on just 3 trillion to affect inflation or to address other issues, then I think we are not looking at the right thing, because money supply is what we should address. And what has led to increase in money supply in recent times? Ways and means. And so which is actually within the purview of the central bank to actually carefully manage, so that we don't further put pressure on exchange rate, and its part effect will not continue to dampen expectation on inflation.
Yeah, I think we have the historical. I just saw the graph now, because I will really need to interpret this graph and understand what it is. This is a trend of currency outside the bank for some time now. So talk to us about around this, please.
So on the first slide, can you go to the previous slide? On the first slide where you have the graph, and you observe that currency, so look at the red line, you see that currency in circulation, currency outside the bank to currency in circulation. The complaint is that this is over 80%, but you will observe that in recent times it has even declined.
It's about 50 here.
So you read the red line to the right, and you read that to the left, I beg your pardon, while the blue is to the right, the right. So it's showing that yes, even if it's still above 80, but we've had period of low inflation in the past, particularly between 2012 and 2013, when we had, during Sanusi, when we had inflation around 10%, 11%, in fact, 9% was achieved substantially. And this period was characterized by high, currency outside the bank, currency with people compared to the currency in circulation, because the objective of printing money is to be with people. Otherwise, why do we need to print money? Banks don't need to keep money. Like, they don't need to keep those cash with them. Otherwise, the CBN is actually just wasting money to print paper. So this is actually showing that, yes, there's no major concern around currency out of the bank, that is currency with public, compared to the currency CBN has printed to the public, which is the currency in circulation. And if you look at the other chart that shows currency in circulation to money supply, that is the second one, the blue line, you see that it has declined significantly, which also speaks to one fact that the Nigerian economy is now operating more like a cashless policy.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that in all of this, what does it mean for the cashless space, the cashless economy? Are we still in tune with that? And is it actually helping us achieve financial inclusion?
To some extent, actually, it's helping us to achieve financial inclusion. You know, I was talking about the blue graph.
Yes.
You observe that currency in circulation, that is those notes that have been printed by the CBN, compared to money supply, right? Money supply here, we're talking about currency outside the bank plus demand deposit. Demand deposit is when you have, that is your current account balance plus time deposit, which is called your savings. And, you know, you have time and saving deposit. So when you have all of that.
All right, we're still talking around the redesigning of the Naira. I don't know what your reaction is to this, but I have an investment strategist here who's been breaking it down for me graphically and all of that. Mr. Moshi is live here. Mr. Moshi, let's continue. You were making a point from when I asked you about the cashless, the efforts being made, to make everyone cashless and let us leave this cash thing and continue to have our transactions online. One way or the other, how is that going to impact all of this scheme and initiatives?
So I think if you look at, like I was saying, if you look at the Nigerian economy, you see that it's already a lot more cashless.
Cashless, right?
For instance, look at currency in circulation. Like I said, currency in circulation is what the CBN has printed in form of hard, notes to the public. If you look at the ratio, particularly from the blue graph, you see that it has decelerated significantly. It has declined significantly compared to money supply. Currency in circulation to money supply has declined significantly because what you use for transaction in the economy is money supply. And so currency circulation is just a subset. In fact, it's less than 9%, currently less than 9% of money supply. That is, those notes are just less than 9% of what we have, in form of money supply, because money supply has so many components. Your current account balance, your savings, your savings account, your time deposit, liability of merchant banks, all of those are components of money supply. So if you look at the trend, look at the graph, you will see that it has decelerated over time, which shows that, the economy is largely cashless as we speak. And in fact, Nigeria is ranked as one of the, fastest, in fact, in terms of real-time payment globally. I think Nigeria should be seized. So if you check the second chart, you observe a very interesting trend. And when you look at the check part of transaction, you see that it has declined significantly from 2012 compared to POS, ATM, internet banking, which is that people are now embracing what? Cashless policy.
Yeah.
And if you go back to even a FINA report that is enabling financial inclusion and assets, that has to do with financial inclusion number, you see that recently there's been improvement to around 60, right? But the major driver of that, improvement is bank agents, because you now have POS around and all that. So one can say to a large extent that the Nigerian economy is becoming largely cashless, and thankfully, I think the transformation started from 2020 when people could not move around. They could not go to physical banks, so they had to use, internet banking. They had to use their USSD and a number of other platforms to have access to financial products and services. But then to say that the current initiative of the central bank would enhance financial inclusion. So one thing I always explain is that financial inclusion is not all about having a bank account. What government wants or what is demanded globally is for people to use financial products and services. What if people, because of this apprehension that by January they won't be able to use the old note, they just open an account so that they can do that, and after which they just leave the account? That means financial inclusion has not been achieved. So financial inclusion has to do with people haven't opened an account, a bank account, they have to use financial product and services. So two things could happen. One, people could just open an account for the purpose of just ensuring that I have the old note in my account, get the new one, and from there just leave the account there. Or they'll go through their bank agent. I mentioned something that the recent improvement in financial inclusion that we have seen recently, like that we have seen, at the last FINA report, was as a result of bank agents. So people could go to the bank agents on their street, the POS outlet, give their money, tell them, please, let me take this money to the bank. I don't have a bank account. And this guy will charge them something. So ultimately, it may not really even enhance financial inclusion. So we have to really address financial inclusion outside of the new currency that we want to print. I think we have to begin to look at problems to financial inclusion. What are those challenges? Access to banks, access to banks, cost of transaction, and even willingness to use those, those financial products and services. We still see that people don't, old people to be precise, they don't have trust in the financial system. They don't even have trust in technology. And if you look at the structure of financial inclusion, it's largely in the northern part of the country because you don't have physical banks. How will this current, arrangement of new currency enhance financial inclusion? So I think we are just putting so much effort about what shouldn't get so much of our attention. I think the problem is what is the fact that it's affecting exchange rate. And you and I know that in Nigeria, exchange rate is sticky downward and flexible upward. So what I mean by that is once there's problem with exchange rate in Nigeria, exchange rate doesn't really come down. That is, it just defies the law of gravity, regardless of what the CBN will do afterward, except for what we saw in 2017 when exchange rate hit 500 and decelerated a little. But prior to 2016, and even after then, we've not seen a major appreciation of the currency. So at the current market rate of over, 800 now, and the official rate is still around the 400 and 450, it shows that, there's a problem that, in fact, it seems the policy has created more problem than it tends to solve.
But let's talk about the timing and all of that. Are you sure this won't cause a form of economic dislocation, considering the timing, the time frame? Two-in-one question, because time is fast spent. And also, do you think, I know you're not a security expert, but can it help address a little bit of illicit flow of funds?
Well, a similar event happened in India, and that was in 2016. Government felt, in fact, that was so sudden, and the time frame was very short, shorter than what we have now. Government felt, okay, people would, in a way, it will reduce corruption and other illicit activities. But at the end of the day, they discovered that people had their money, as they're getting money from ransom and all that, they were finding a way to transfer it to foreign banks. They were using it for real estate and other assets. They were not held in cash. So ultimately, this may not really address some of the fundamental problems. Okay, let's even say to address those problems between now and January. What will happen after January?
After January.
Insecurity continues. Yeah. So kidnappers will continue to now they'll get ransom in new currency.
The new notes.
The new currency. So I think it's better we address fundamental factors that affect insecurity, macroeconomic indicators, than having to just do, more like a surface dressing and all that, which will not really affect. It's just what we are doing is nominal rather than the real. The real thing is fundamental factors affecting insecurity. Has to do with culture, has to do with hardship, and a number of other factors. Leadership, all that factors affecting insecurity, rather than having to address it with monetary policy. In fact, monetary policy is doing so much in Nigeria.
And we don't even know why the fiscal side is coming to support.
So much. You see, monetary policy
do you see much of a support from the fiscal side?
That is a major problem in Nigeria. We are not seeing much of. Just imagine when the central bank announced this, the fiscal authority said she was not aware. So that alone speaks volume. Beyond what Nigeria see, is also telling foreign investors that there is no sync. That between the monetary policy authority and fiscal side, because the fiscal side should also be carried along, because they are all very consequential in terms of macroeconomic objectives. So I think if the disconnect continues, it will continue to wane the impact of monetary policy on the economy. So because if we're talking about insecurity, that should be the objective of the fiscal authority. We begin to see central bank everywhere, in agriculture, in defense, in a number of
all
other
forms of intervention.
All forms of intervention. But I think it's high time we began to look at fundamental factors rather than having to change currency, rather than having to change people and all that. So fundamental factors must be addressed.
Going forward, interesting chat with you, I must say. But going forward, and that's that fear. My colleague will soon be here now. Efengani will tell you about the political exposure and what we should expect as we move on to the election. So going forward, what do you think? Do you think this could help shaping anything moving to the elections? And the growth projections being made. I don't want to be specific with anyone now. Nigerian government has theirs. World Bank has theirs. IMF has theirs. You know what I'm talking about. But what's your outlook?
Regardless of the growth outlook from the IMF, World Bank, and the government, any growth below 7% is substandard. Any is suboptimal. So if you check from the World Bank, all those growth outlook from all of these agencies are still less than 4%. And this growth is not inclusive because prices are rising significantly. You know, money supply is increasing significantly. And if you look at it in terms of even how it impacts people, creating jobs, there's still high level of unemployment. So if the growth is not inclusive, why do I choose, 7% or 8%? Because if you look at Nigeria historically, the period that we had low unemployment was characterized by high level of growth of over 7-8%. So, and if we want to go back to that level, then I believe 7-8% growth should do the job for us, not growth of 3%, 4%. That shouldn't be celebrated. And my fear is that how do we now address, before now, we've been talking about the synergy between parallel market and the official rate. But as this shock continues and it continues to put pressure on the FS market, it's now, making it worse for the central bank to adjust to the parallel market or to find a synergy between these two markets, because at some point we know that, yes, market will definitely prevail because market has all the information. For instance, what is currently happening, the FS market, the black market or the parallel market or unofficial market have fully digested all information, while the CBN would have to just manage. So once the CBN comes to align with the market, then it becomes, before now we're talking about 600. If we had done it at some point, maybe the premium was just 30. But now we are looking at close to 100% divergence between official and parallel. So this has created a major problem. And again, for inflation, if you want to destroy any economy, just cause price instability. And investors will definitely run away from the country. And, there's a lot of repression here and there. For instance, look at interest rates. It's not reflecting inflation. Exchange rate on the one is not also reflecting. It's not reflecting the market. So I think we just have to address fundamental factors, which has to do with what is the government doing in terms of, and everything is hinged on one thing: productivity. Everything is hinged on productivity and a bit of the insecurity. If we don't produce, nothing will exchange, no matter effort or anything around exchange, nothing will happen.
Of course.
If we don't address productivity, nothing will happen to inflation that will be sustainable.
Mr. Tebitokwe, interesting conversation as usual. I think we need to have a session and let's set an agenda for whoever becomes Nigeria's coming CEO. We need to talk about all of these fundamentals and all of that. We'll have a session on that. We'll talk about it. Thank you so much. Mr. Tebitokwe Omoshiri is an investment strategist with Afri Invest Assets Management Limited. Thank you so much. I do enjoy the rest of your day. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.